Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma and Jenna Says. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Today's episode is No BS Manifesting, Straight Talk for Skeptics.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set. As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick moment and hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to get the inside info on this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationpodcast.com. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
Well, hello there, Nick.
Hey there, Kizma.
It's been a minute.
Yet again.
It's been a minute since we've podcasted.
We were doing so good with those 3 or 4 episodes that we did. Or just like out of the blue, we're podcasting. and then we didn't. So, But we're back and I'm excited to be back, and very cool edition.
We have a very cool edition, everyone. And this is why we're back, because if you've been following me or Nick, you know that we have Illumination Academy, and it's an amazing company for personal development, spiritual development, success. And we have a group called the Ashram Alchemists and Ashram Masters, and a whole bunch of cool stuff's going on. So our most special being in the ashram is Jenna, who is our concierge. And we have always wanted to bring her on a podcast. And then we were sitting around after Prosperity Code Live, and we're like, maybe we just need to sit down and have Jenna as our very new addition, brand new character. And just so you know, Poppy is here too, her dog. And so we thought we might call it the Popcast. Mm-hmm. But Jenna, welcome. Tell everyone just a little bit about you and what they can expect from your Jenna Says sass.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love to bring playfulness and fun into everything. And recently we had your event, Prosperity Code Live. It was so much fun, and people think I'm joking when I say I live for events. I'm not joking. And everyone was like, hey, you're really funny. And, I've always secretly thought that, but you don't really ever want to be the first person to say it, So I had a really good time. And one of the things, if you've been in Kizma's world or any world, you always have, this thing in the back of your head that you want to do, and it always sounds really dumb. And so I started joking with my friends, they're asking me, where's my career going? Where's this? And I kind of just care about having fun. And I said, I really, really just want to be a podcast co-host. And so I started joking about that. I even put in my Instagram bio, aspiring podcast co-host. And this is my first little venture into that.
This is it. And
we're honored.
We're honored, and it's in alignment with our topic of manifesting. So just kind of a flashback for those of you that were at Prosperity Code Live in San Diego. We put Jenna on stage for the first time ever. So she's helping to run the team in the back. And I was just like, we need like a little change in the energy. And so she got up there and did Jenna Says. And the whole audience, everybody there, followed your direction.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
They had fun doing it.
Mm-hmm, they did have fun.
It was a little uncomfortable, but it was also really, really funny. And it's fun to be in the back of the room, seeing everyone. And, I talk to everyone between sessions, and then it'd be up on the stage for the very first time, everyone looking at you. It was a different experience, and I see why Kizma is the one that does that all the time and not me.
It is kind of wild when you just have people staring at you and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to talk now.
Yeah, all right.
I'm supposed to be entertaining.
That's what Nick was like, yeah, just get on the mic. And I said, I don't know, I can just make something up, Simon Says or Jenna Says. And they said, yeah, do that. Okay. And then everyone loved it, so I did it again the next day. And so good. It was really fun.
And now it's a thing. And it's really exciting for us because it adds a new voice and a new perspective into the podcast. I think Kizma and I living together, working together, like studying these things together, it gets a little insular sometimes, and we're just sort of like, it doesn't always connect, So having you here as a kind of an ad hoc translator of sorts, and skillful questioner. You always ask awesome questions. I think it's going to add a really fun dynamic to the podcast.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, we get to hang out with Poppy for a little while.
Yeah, she's loving it.
She is. Yeah, she's in. She's all in.
So we sat around and we were figuring out in what way we could position this topic of manifesting. And Jenna brought some, we could say muggle vibe from some people asking her about manifesting, but that's really why we started, we had this title like No BS Manifesting, Straight Talk for the Skeptics, because number one, it's okay to be skeptical. And number two, well, you're going to hear what number two is, but it's basically, we really are manifesting all the time. So Jenna, why don't you kick it off a little bit and pick our brains or share some of the things you've been hearing like in other worlds, because you have this magical way of like kind of floating around different realms, I feel like, on the planet.
Yeah, I am definitely cosmic floater. So one thing that came up the other day was why manifesting? How is it any different than just making a list and following the steps? And that tripped me up because when I'm trying to manifest it, I want to say try and cut that out. Delete. When I'm manifesting something, that is part of the process. And I would love to hear more comments on that. Why manifesting instead of a checklist?
Well, yeah. Because I think it's important to talk about the whole when are we manifesting conversation first.
Yeah, 100%. So there are checklists involved in manifesting, I believe, because if you set an intention and there's something you want to bring in very specific, you're going to have to take action. I think some of you have heard me say there's maybe 3 people on the planet that are instant alchemists, where they think about it and they can bring it in. They're not going to be on a podcast, and they're going to be doing it for very, very high level healing of the planet. So the checklists are important. I think that there are certain types of people who came in, as I say, like landed on the planet, were born, raised, and they're really clear. And so they know if there's something they want, they create a checklist and they just go, and they don't get in their way. I think those people are few and far between. I could be wrong, but maybe it's because as a coach, I help people so much get out of their own way. So think about it this way. The opposite of having your checklist and just taking action is, okay, I want to do this thing. This would be really amazing. And then all of a sudden, someone says, well, how are you going to do that? And once you ask how, there's doubt that comes in. And when doubt comes in, the energy turns. And when the energy turns, there's just a different vibration that we're putting off. If we just look at the science of manifesting or the law of vibration, we're sending out a specific frequency of energy that is going to attract like frequency. Is that helpful so far, guys?
Yeah. I think it's useful to back up a little bit and talk even about what you mentioned at the beginning, that we're always manifesting. Like you're always creating something in your life. Like you do things in the world, and those things create results. That's the law of karma or law of action and reaction. So we're always operating within that. And so when we talk about manifesting, oftentimes that's become like a new blanket term. That's, the law of attraction, I'm attracting it, or I'm vibing, or like whatever it is. It's kind of vague and not really understood. Well, what does it mean? Well, in our world, that means intentionally creating results and hopefully creating exceptional results in your life, results that you really want. So this whole conversation about, well, isn't it just a checklist? Well, sure. Like you said, that's definitely part of it. And it's all of the internal work that goes in making sure that you come to that checklist really clean, really enthusiastic and excited, and creating something that is really true to what you actually want. A lot of people create very unintentionally, and they have results. They create results in their lives that are like, at best, maybe hit or miss. Like, I really wanted that, and it came at this cost. I destroyed myself trying to achieve that goal, or that wasn't quite what I wanted. Kind of like that, but not really. And so it becomes kind of either haphazard or comes at a cost that people don't really want to pay.
Or they manifest what they believe they don't want.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's agitation, maybe there's frustration, maybe there's like what we're going to talk about in the ashram this month is dense energy and light energy. So, Jenna, when you think about the people that ask those questions, the quote unquote skeptics, what do you see as the difference between how they're just creating and some of the ways we bring this from, I would say, the universal laws or the spiritual perspective?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
That is a great question that deserves even more questions.
Ask away.
Well, to start, one thing I do notice is that people who manifest things seemingly easily, it's because they aren't in their own way or they don't see that anyone else is in their own way.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a lot of work, and I think it is almost what you said. We're in this world of people who are doing this work and they want to get to another level. And there's people that are totally happy at the level they're at and they love it and they're there and they're already doing what they want. They just want to have it a little better. And the reason is because they let things be easy. And so in what I've learned working with you guys is that was something I had to learn. It's a daily ongoing process. And particularly with my boyfriend, Bryson, everything is just easy. It's just how it is. And so he just came like that. I had to learn it.
I had to learn it.
Bryson came like that.
He just came like that.
Bryson needs to start a cult.
I like it.
So that's one thing that I've noticed is, the people who say, yeah, just make a checklist and it happens. They have these qualities that a lot of us are trying to build those muscles. They already have them. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I notice.
Well, but also there's people unlike that who do make the checklists and who do all the things and still do not manifest or what they really, their goals or their desires out of that. And so I think the list itself is limited because that's what your brain can come up with. So a big part of manifesting is actually, okay, great, have that. You got to have that because if you don't, know what else, or you got to take some kind of action to get the energy moving. But all of the things that happen outside of that list that your brain could just never conceive. And that's the value of really understanding the process of manifesting so that you can be available to those different opportunities and tasks and things like that show up that you would have just never thought of until they were right in front of you. And if you're limited by your list and just totally immersed in your list, that's all you're going to see. Mm-hmm. And that's your one way to get there. And there are many paths to the top of the mountain, as they say, many paths to get what you want. And you can often have a much easier path or more direct path that we just don't even know about.
I totally agree with that. The list is part of my manifesting story. And I want any skeptics listening, I want you to hang on because Nick is our energy expert and he said energy and frequency a bunch of times. So I want us to explain that in a second. As far as the list goes, what clicked for me when making the list and manifesting and Kisma's vision board process that really works, I made her do the course and because it works. That's how we came up with the name. There's no other way to say it. And the thing that finally clicked for me last year was about the list that Nick was talking about is Kisma's process is very in depth and it's really great, but I just needed to make a list. I just had to be right about that, had to have a list. And I had a friend sit me down and she was like, you need to think about every single thing that might be important. So I did that. And I got a little stuck because I was like, this feels kind of superficial in a lot of ways. And then I had Kisma's voice in the back of my head and Nick's voice in the back of my head because it's always there. And I started thinking, well, why are these things important? What is the feeling I want to have? And that really, really helped me because there's all of these things that, like Nick said, I don't know exist. why limit myself to something that I'm aware of? And I started thinking about this a couple years ago during the Olympics. I was watching this event. I'm totally blanking what it's called, but they ski around and they stop and shoot things with a gun.
Right. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. I had never seen it before. And these people are really, really good at it. I have no idea what they were doing, but I could tell they were good. And so I had this moment of, oh my God, what if I am really good at something that I don't even know exists? So I started that journey, and I just started trying a bunch of things, and that kind of opened up the floodgates to this experience of being unattached from the words on the list, because the vision's important, the list is important. I took myself out of, it has to be this exact line item.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where
that's awesome.
I think that's where we can sprinkle some of the magic in. So when we were talking earlier, we were just saying that sometimes we're very much in a box. Like we have this set, just think about when we're kids, the way that we want to get love, the way we want to get attention. Maybe that's what we do now as adults until we decide we want to do it differently. But there's a set of parameters and paradigms that we operate where we think this is what's possible. So cool. There's a lot that's possible. I think we all see it. And I think every day we start to see more and more. When we manifest from, whether you call it a spiritual perspective, an energetic perspective, that's when we start to go beyond the box, the constructs that are there. And we then have this, I just think it's almost like this enlightening moment of, wow, I really am like this incredible being on the planet, capable of so much more if I want to be. Like maybe you listeners out there are perfectly happy with what you're doing and how you're being. That's incredible. But when you think about maybe, like Jenna, there's something out there that you haven't even tried. So it comes down to that expansion, I feel like, and being willing to have that it's possible energy that we talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. In staying in that, I'm so with you, Jenna. I think part of the fun of living is finding those things and having fun, just taking them as far as they'll go. Mm-hmm. And I know that can seem like, for some people, that can seem like a little maybe flighty. I've certainly been accused of that, of wanting to just check it out and try it for a little while. And I'm like, I'm not really into that, and on to the next thing. But it's like finding those things that you can just really explore for the fun of it, for no other reason than I want to, and I liked what you were saying about what you described as kind of like stripping away the desire to be like, well, what is this really about? That's part of the inner work that goes along with manifesting in our world that I think really helps to expand things and also really helps to understand yourself better. Like when you know what you really want, and it's shocking to me how many people actually have no idea what they want. They're so vague about it and have no idea what's driving them. Then when you have that, like you have an absolutely infinite well of energy and resources that you can use to just propel you forward in the most fun and interesting ways possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I would love to have you, Nick, touch a little bit on the energy, which is another thing I've heard from the skeptics in my life, is they say, the woo-woo stuff, whatever you want to call it, why do I need the woo-woo stuff? The woo-woo stuff can be explained by so many other things. And, isn't it just this? Isn't it something that happened to you? Isn't it your subconscious and all of that? So why energy? Let's break that down for people who are listening that are just not on board with that.
On board with the whole energy thing.
Yeah.
In general, like the subtle layers and all of that. Yeah. You're right. Like it can be explained by a lot of other things, and it can be explained up to a point. Only up to a point. There's plenty of things in our world and in our universe that we have absolutely no idea about. And so let's just get that out on the table first, is like we think we know, but we really don't know at all. We don't even know 100% like how our bodies heal themselves. We just know that if you cut yourself, a certain reaction happens and your body starts to clot it, and starts to heal the wound and knit it back together just on its own. Cool. Like we know that it does that. We know how to help that, but we actually don't know why that actually happens. So I think if we have even just a little bit of humility around the whole thing, we'll start to understand there's so much that we have no idea about that we can start to tap into and explore. And the same way that you don't need to understand how a car runs, you just put the key in, you need to know how to drive it. That's important. But you don't need to know all the things about a combustion engine or how exactly the drive works on the electric vehicle or anything like that. You just need to know how to drive it. So you can ride around the world in your mystery, right? And you don't have to know any about that. You can just get where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you think about energy is the thing that we already know is everything. Everything has an energetic component to it. And so when we start to think about how to utilize that just on a raw level, like how we use our own energy and resources, whether that be physically or mentally or emotionally, how we use those resources, then we get to really look at how we can be more efficient with it, how we can direct it in a very intentional and useful way, and how we can mitigate the losses and the drama of the spinning, right? So there's a subtle level to all of us that we're constantly operating in that we can always be more masterful in how we utilize that. So when we talk about energy, we're talking about the unseen world or the unseen forces. They express through us in physical ways, right? The energy of our bodies, being able to go through your day without hitting a crash at 2 p.m. and, just wanting to check out, without knocking back another couple Red Bulls or coffees or whatever in order to have more energy. Like you can actually access that within yourself. So that's important because you need energy to pursue your goals. You need enthusiasm. You need like mental clarity in order to be clear in those things and to take directed action. So all of that falls under this context of energy. Could you break it down into the mental component? Yeah, but then people like get too way over focused on that. Could you break it down just into the etheric component and just focus on that? Sure, but then you don't really get a chance to understand what your mind is doing behind the scenes or how your subconscious works. All of those things are energy. And when we look at them in different components, it's really helpful to understand. But when you put them together on a whole, you have a much more complex system, and you can marshal that many more resources to really put towards the things that are most important to you in your life. That's why I think energy is so important. And I hope that makes some sense to people that are like a little bit off with that conversation or just don't pay it much credence.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good explanation. And I want to clarify when you say unseen forces, because I know that's a word that people, say, oh, that's a little too out there for me. We're not talking about Jedi forces or Gandalf waving up his hands or Harry Potter waving the wand. You're basically saying that it's anything outside of our physical body?
Intangible.
Well, yeah, things and things outside of our
consciousness,
our senses, our sensory awareness. Gravity is an unseen force. We're not aware of it because it's just always there, but that it's always operating. You can't see it. Like we can't see it other than the fact that we're not floating around. You can see it very clearly then. So
I think there's going to be, maybe people get to define for themselves what unseen forces is. Like it's going to be different. Some people have, like, I believe we all have a spiritual team hovering. I really do. And I believe the universal intelligence space is the ultimate. Some people, we could refer to it as God, source, energy, whatever. I just call it universe, is this ultimate cause and effect, undifferentiated consciousness. But maybe that is just too bizarre for some people. So think about it this way. Just a really easy example of energy, you walk into a restaurant and you're like, oh, I really like the vibe here. Somebody seats you. They're really friendly. They're nice. They're not just smiling and doing their job. They have a certain energy about them that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And by the same token, you could walk into an art gallery and having a perfectly good time. And then all of a sudden you feel like something is off and you turn around and there's a person that walked through the door and you're like, it doesn't feel right. Something's wrong. We have this whatever sense, intuition, reading ability, but it's there. And I think we can all glance at a moment in time where we felt it. And that's what we mean by energy and frequency and the same level of frequency.
You bring up a really good point, is then connecting it to our real world. I think in understanding this, or just being comfortable playing around in that realm, it's important to connect it to things that we understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's, you can't go from the unknown to the unknown. You have to go from the known to the unknown, right? We have to be able to bridge that gap for ourselves. And so Kisma gives a couple great examples there on a little bit more subtle level. On a more physical level, just think about the food you eat. When you eat certain foods, which food is energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your body takes that and converts it into energy. Some foods make you feel great and some foods make you feel terrible. So
that's a good one.
You know, if you think about it like that, well, is it the quality of the food? Is it like what? Well, it's probably a lot of those things. Part of it could be the quality of the food. Part of it could be what your body does with that food, right? Everybody has their own reaction to it, but that's an energetic thing, or an energetic reaction that's happening, chemical reaction that's happening in your body that releases more or less energy for you to work with.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
super grounded ways to think about it. It's right there in front of us. But if you're only thinking in physical terms, you're missing a big part of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally get that. And it's what I think about often is a lot of times we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But like you said, we're saying it based on what we know to be true.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like when you are smelling something and your brain, if you have never smelled that exact smell before, your brain tells you that it smells like the closest thing that you have smelled.
Yeah.
And I kind of getting from you that that's what it's like, is you're associating it with the closest thing that you do know. And there's going to be a smell that I don't know, and then I'm going to learn it, or I'm not. And I'm just going to walk around thinking that the hotel's burning down when it's not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yes, I would totally agree with that. And being able to see a level that is beyond the physical, right? So understanding that, okay, we eat food and then that there's something happens that's different for different people, because the way that I react to certain foods is not the way that you react to certain foods. And understanding that there's a subtle reaction that's happening there inside of ourselves that's doing something with the energy, right? So there's another layer to it that we're just not always thinking about lots of times. And lots of people just aren't inclined to think about that. You know, they're like, I don't eat that because it makes me feel bad. And that's where they stop. Great. You know, that's fine.
I want to offer one thing that really helps. If everyone glances back to a point in time, or even this point forward, when you do people watching, if you're at a restaurant, if you're at the airport, the mall, whatever it is, watch groups of people. You're going to see that similar people are together. And if not, if somebody is sticking out for whatever reason, just observe them. There's something different. So this is like that like attracts like. Happy people generally attract other happy people. People that are not happy, they're critical, they're whatever, they generally hang around people that are also, it's like it's a feeding energy. And I think that's a really cool way to look at just what does happen out there, and what we're putting out, we're getting back.
Yeah. Now, for the skeptics, right, you could call that sociology. Looking at like how do these groups interact? Like what happens when they get bigger or smaller, and what's the vibe about it? But in a very practical way, you can see the shifts from group to group, and like how do these people operate? What sorts of people are attracted to that? Well, there's an unseen level that's happening there. It's not just happening through their words. There's like a little collective consciousness. A little collective consciousness. Yeah, that's exactly how you put it. That's a great way to put it. So yeah, I agree with you, Jenna. It's a lot of times we're just saying the same things, but we're saying it in different ways.
Yeah.
But I do think still that there's immense value in looking at the subtle layers and the things that we don't understand and just being like, there's something there.
Yeah. And to Kisma's point about people watching, we are all going to notice different things based on our experiences.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that also ties into some people who might be skeptical is they're coming from their experience, we're coming from our experience, and we're all kind of trying to put together this puzzle. Like when people watch, I look at people and their dogs, and I can instantly see how everyone looks like their dog. It's just something in my brain clicks and everyone looks like their dog. I can't deny it. And people are like, I don't see how that person looks like their dog. And I can sit there and explain it. And it's just, okay, Jenna's doing her weird dog thing. That's fine. But that's something that I notice. And there is sociology, there is psychology, there is this woo, and it all comes together. And I think when we stop saying there's only one way to do this, there's only two ways to do this or whatever, I think that's when manifesting really kind of takes off for you, is that it's back to me watching the Olympics. What if there's a way to do it
Exactly.
that I didn't know?
I had no idea about. Yeah.
Let me just tie it all up if I can. If you're a skeptic and you want to stay a skeptic, do so. And just pay attention to the ways that you create things, you reach your goals, your projects, whatever. Just pay attention. And every now and then ask yourself, would I like it to be easier? Would I like it to be, dare I say, even more magical? Just ask the questions, because once we start to ask our own brain, we get into a little wonderment of like, maybe there is this other way. Maybe it could be a little bit faster, easier, or I could even have this sense of, I don't know, elevating in life in a way. If you have a strong spiritual practice in manifesting, I would say watch your skeptic friends and learn from them, because they've been manifesting by doing, like Jenna's boyfriend, doing the checklist, taking action. There's not a lot of excuses as to why it won't work. So we have to be careful that the deeper elements of work we do in our personal and spiritual journey does not start to create their own excuses as to why something wouldn't happen. For instance, someone might say, well, I have this unworthiness. We'll get over the unworthiness. Like, stop it. Like, let's just stop that and keep moving forward. So I think it's a really interesting way that we can learn from one another and keep designing the life we really want. Because at the end of the day, as you hear me say a lot, life is brief, it's short. Why wouldn't we just have the best possible existence that we can?
Yeah. To wrap up for me, maybe I should have started with this too, is I want to talk just a little bit about skepticism, right? And healthy skepticism. So we've the negative skeptics, right, out there. And if your skepticism is based on that's wrong, that won't work, that doesn't make sense, and you're discounting it because of that, that's not actually skepticism. Healthy skepticism is curiosity. Is saying, okay, well, maybe I don't quite understand that, or I'm not so sure about this. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And that kind of curiosity helps to lead you down some really interesting and valuable rabbit holes if you allow it. But negative skepticism is stuck in a way of being that this is the way it is. And that's fine if that works for you and you enjoy that and that's what you want. Great. But if you're curious about, hey, what might be possible? Could this be easier? Or like Jenna said, are there things that I just never even considered, right? That's a healthy skepticism, to say it's being skeptical about where you're at and what you have, if that's all there is. It's being skeptical about that rather than skeptical about what's possible.
Yeah, for sure. And
what about you? What's your wrap up, Jenna?
I could go on about this all day long. And I think the biggest thing I want people to take away from this is let everyone be who they're going to be. If that has helped me so much in my manifesting journey, is, selfishly making it about myself And if someone doesn't fit into that, that's fine. They're going to be who they're going to be. And, you know, like Nick said, there's people that are just fine. They're fine being how they're going to be. And I know people like that. And, like Kevin is a great example. Like our mentor, he always said, like, I'm good. Like he would walk into, you know, a room for personal development because that's his clients are. And he would just get up and leave because he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm happy with how everything is.
He was.
Yeah. And then
He was genuinely. Yeah.
yeah. And to kind of go back, like I learned so much from him, and just reverse engineering that almost is like, okay, well, that's why this worked. That's why this worked.
Right.
And he's another person that's just like came like that. So that would be my challenge to you is if you're someone who I used to do this, like, oh, it's so easy for them and not for me. Well, why? Like reverse engineer, and you'll kind of see why everything we're saying is going to make sense at some
love
point.
that.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome.
So good. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is Illumination Podcast with Nick, Kizma, and Jenna Says. We just added that in. Jenna's a new character. We're really excited to have her because she's going to pick our brains and make things even more magical. So please share this episode with skeptics, with manifesting lovers, and feel free to email us if you have any questions or ideas for shows at
hello@illuminationpodcast.com.
All right, we'll see you next time, everyone. Much love.